Good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you again for staying for the final session for today for the Slate Seminar 2023. Again, this is the W&M Bray School Lab annual conference. We function very much as a conference within a conference. We are part of the larger 2026 conference that the Omohundro Institute hosts 5 years going into 2026, Contested Freedoms being the theme, of course, for this year. Also part of this larger conference is the Rev Ed, so Revolutionary Education sessions as well, that are largely focused on educators, museum educators, K-12 teachers, and other persons who support those missions as well. So we've got a robust conference this year, and it just keeps getting bigger, and I think it just keeps getting better as well. So please enjoy the bigger space that we now have. There's plenty of seats, always, there's plenty of seats at the front. But there are seats, so please, I'll give everyone a chance to get settled in. It's okay. We've got lots of time, and we're not going to rush. Okay, I want you to be comfortable and feel welcome. All right, so thank you again. We have our Hard History, the Work Continues panel, and we are going to widen our conversation, extend our arms, if you would, to our partners here at Will & Mary in terms of some of the other divisions here at Will & Mary. So James and Rose Highlands represented the Lemon Project and their respective directors. We'll have a number of housekeeping notes to kind of wrap up the day and also to look forward to tomorrow. I, of course, will hold those off until the end. So please do stay through our conversation this afternoon. We had a great morning with the W&M Bray School 101, kind of really covering the terrain and diving more deeply into oral history and genealogy as important avenues of research, the way they speak to each other, and how they help fill the gaps between what oftentimes is seen as the official history, the official documents, the archive, and how that very much needs to be supplemented by oral history, genealogy, and other means and ways of knowing and growing and producing knowledge. So we've had a great day. I'm super, super pleased, super excited, and glad to move on to this panel, which is really one of my favorite panels because we do get to kind of stretch our arms out and reach and engage with others who are doing equally similar, and for everyone at the table who have been doing this work longer than we have at the lab. So definitely acknowledge the long tradition of excellence in research that is represented by both my co-panelists today. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome Jody Lynn Allen. Dr. Allen is a faculty member in the Department of History. She is also the named professor for the Lemon Project. I'm going to have her do her own quick little bio. And a compelling scholar, teacher, and community partner. She holds leadership positions in different institutions and is certainly, as Sara, a force to be reckoned with. My kids ask me, what does that mean? Because I throw them, you're a force. My daughter is like, you're a force to be reckoned with. And she's like, she's 15, so she is a force to be reckoned with some days. And she's like, well, what does that mean? So in all the positive ways that phrase has meaning, just incredible leadership and scholarship. So I want to welcome to the podium and invite her to lead us off today in the afternoon. Jody Lynn Allen, Dr. Allen.
Thank you, Maureen, and thank you for inviting me to participate again this year. Is this close enough? Okay. Okay. So last year we talked about, I talked about the dedication of Hearth Memorial to the enslaved, and the Lemon Project. And today I'll be talking about what we've done in the previous year. Okay, the preceding year, right? And so kind of catching you up. So what do I, let me put this up here. So we've had our typical signature events. We've been, as Maureen suggested, we've been doing this for a minute, as they say, and we just had our 13th annual symposium. But I'm going to show you all of our signature projects. So this is a branch out alternative break that we do every year with the Office of Community Engagement at W&M Bray. And this is just, instead of a whole lot of words up here, I put some pictures. And so these are some of the students who are working with, it's a service opportunity. And we do this every year around the King holiday weekend, and they produce a service project. This group, although I didn't have a picture of them at Hearth, almost everything you're going to see, Hearth is in the background, and that's a key of what we're trying to do. It's becoming completely encompassed in our work. Okay, this is again, pictures from our 13th annual Spring Symposium. Our guest speaker you see here, Judge John Charles Thomas, who was the first African American on the Virginia Supreme Court, and then other pictures of the group. And then our closing session, we invited people to have a gathering at Hearth just to hear about it if they hadn't already heard about it and been to visit. This is another of our signature programs, Dining of the Kente, which is a graduation weekend rite of passage event that we have usually on Friday afternoons, and you see students, everybody's smiling because they're all graduating. But we also now, the ceremony takes place in the Sunken Garden, and which is on the older part of campus. But we now, since Hearth has been there, we take a group picture at Hearth, and we process from Hearth through the archway to the ceremony, again, connecting our history with our present. Okay. We also have we have a genealogy initiative led by Dr. Jawan Johnson, who happens to be sitting over there. And we had our third annual Summer Sankofa series, which is a 3-part series that we do, that he does every summer on genealogy. We also do things like this, in terms of sharing our scholarship. We had Dr. Johnson and Tanya Meredith, who's with the Bray Lab, just participated in the Oral History Association conference in Baltimore. And so again, sharing what we do. These other two, I visited the University of the South last November and did a presentation on Hearth. And wait a minute, I went too fast. And then we've also had an opportunity, Dr. Johnson did, to present virtually at the International Museum of African American History. These are some of our student researchers. I received a couple summers ago what's called an incubator grant, and the idea is to work with, usually students will do summer research projects, but with this particular grant, a faculty member works with students, and these students are working on the pieces and parts of what will become an African American history tour of the campus. And so they've been doing that for the last 2 summers. Okay. So, as I said, we have, last year I talked about Hearth Memorial, the Hearth Memorial that was dedicated in May of 2022. This May, we dedicated what I consider the heart of the memorial, right? The actual vessel where you can burn fires, right? Hearth is representative of a fireplace, a cooking place, a place where the enslaved people boiled water to do clothes, a source of heat. And so we dedicated the vessel this year. And also, one of the things we're going to do as the research continues is annually or biannually, however the research goes, we will be continue to add names that we're finding in the archives. And so we added 13 people this year. And so that happened, that center picture is the stonecutter putting the names or the occupations of whatever we were able to locate on the black bricks are the where the names are listed. Okay. This is us celebrating. I promise you, that's apple cider. But what was really cool, this became such a family. We made new family. These are the architects and the builders and the designer of the vessel. We're all there, and now Hearth was complete except for the names that we will be adding. And so this was a moment to celebrate with each other. This is the first building project I've ever been a part of, so I don't know, maybe this happens all the time, but we were, it became like family, right? And the people who were not necessarily William and Mary people, but they were coming in to help us bring this to fruition, became committed to this project, just as committed as we are. Okay? And so I call this section the Hearth in Action. We have classes at Hearth. This is Steve Prince, the artist in residence. Some of you who've done the Community Quilt Project know who he is. And this is a professor from the School of Business, and he wanted us to come and talk about Hearth. But we have lots of classes, lots of times that we are out there, either myself or Sara or Jawan. In my own classes, we go to Hearth. Okay, this is something that we're very excited about. Our community, the Community Values Pledge, which was a new event that was added last year by the Student Assembly. And those of you who know the story of Hearth, the Student Assembly was very much involved in getting the whole Lemon Project off the ground in the first place. So for them to come up with this I think, very special new addition to the first week for new students. The students here, they go to the Wren building and they recite a honors pledge. And now they come over to Hearth, they learn about Hearth, what it means, what it stands for. And then they take a community values pledge, sign a banner. And so that's now part of. And we also have been invited to set up an information table. We use candy and other treats to make them stop, right? And so they do. They get so excited. But anyway, so we do bribe. This is another thing that happens. So many different organizations and groups want to come and hear about Hearth. Now, these are all campus organizations. At the top left, the entire athletic department participated, wanted to have a tour of Hearth and hear about the historic campus and slavery at William and Mary. In the center is the basketball team, which I always get excited because it's one of the few times I feel short in my life. We have an organization called the Spotswood Society, a student group. The Middle Eastern Music Ensemble had their concert there. And this group here is the Sharp Scholars, okay? Okay. Also, community organizations. Here for the Girls is a breast cancer support organization. The Boy Scouts of America, we know who they are. And this is Vision Lead Grow, and it was a group based in Norfolk, 50 middle school girls that we actually managed to keep entertained. When they came off the bus with middle school girl attitude, but they actually got kind of excited, I think, by the end. We have this is just a picture of our one of our community partners, First Baptist Church. We took some of our students, one of them is cut off, but to the gala last year, okay? And one of our community members who's involved with us. This, again, we work with closely with Oak Grove Baptist Church. And this on the right is a picture of Tanya Mancino, who was a student who visited us for a week in September from Germany. And she's part of a DICOR organization that Dr. Johnson participated in last year in Germany. And this year she wanted to come and learn more about the Lemon Project, this area in general, and learn more about how we're memorializing here. And she was taken to Oak Grove, again, one of our partners. When campus guests come, we either get department heads or they just contact us and say, we want to see Hearth. And so these are just 3 examples. We had Jessica Nabongo came, and she is, this is her book title, but she is in the Guinness Book of Record for having visited all of the UN designated countries. So I think that's 192 or 98, something like that. So she wanted to come to Hearth. This is Professor Daniel Black, who the Bray Lab brought, and he wanted to see Hearth. And then Sarah Fetterman was visiting the School of Business and speaking, and she wanted to see Hearth. Okay. This year, but this was our second year having our homecoming Hearth gathering, where people it's kind of like an open house, where people could come and go, hear about Hearth, learn some of the names. One of the interesting kind of traditions that's, I don't know if I call it a tradition, but habits, I guess maybe, that's come as a result of Hearth is these, you see the flowers on the names. That wasn't anything we had planned, but we had flowers at the dedication, and someone just started putting them on the edges like that, and now we go and they're just there. Now this time we actually did provide the flowers, but so that's one of the things that you can't always think about what might evolve, and some things just evolve on their own, and that's one of those things. Hearth on the Road, this is over here to the, my left, I guess, your left, is the panel that we did at Swanee. Now, that person on the right there is Bert Pinnock, who was the principal architect on the project. So he went all the way we went to Tennessee to talk about Hearth because they're looking at memorializing and recognizing. And so we did a panel there last year at a conference. Just this past, I guess it's been 2 weeks now, Bert and I and someone from Wake Forest University went to Oregon to the National Organization of Minority Architects conference, again, to talk about memorialization. We are a few years into this. Wake Forest is just getting ready to memorialize and establish something akin to the Lemon Project. So that type of thing is happening. We do, again, consultations. We had 2 different groups from Clemson University come to visit to talk about the memorial, and then one and specifically to talk about community engagement and what the kinds of things we're doing in the community. But I have listed up here, we talked to the University of Richmond, as I said, Wake Forest, the University of the South, all of these schools. The university studying slavery has become a movement, okay? Starting in 2005 with Brown University, when Ruth Simmons said, someone asked her a question as she became the first African-American female to become the president of a Ivy League school. They asked her, well, what do you know about slavery at Brown? And she said, I don't. but I know how to find out. And so she established a commission, okay? So I kind of think of her or Brown as the mothership, right? But then we came along in 2007, and then it's every year. It's gotten bigger and bigger, and there are now about 120 colleges, at least one high school in the consortium University Studying Slavery. And we're all in there learning and talking because it's the responsibility, if nothing else, colleges and universities certainly should be teaching accurate and full information, right? I love your face. That's our goal, right? That's our goal. That certainly should be our goal. So, these are opportunities that people just will email us or actually come to campus or what have you, just to see how we're doing, what we are doing, and it helps us too, right? Because we can strengthen, make changes, because we're learning. It's a two-way street, because this is new. This is a very new very new kind of experience, right? Kind of rethinking several hundred years of how something has been taught or not taught on college campuses, and how do we go about fixing it. And I will only just say, especially in this day and age right now, right? And I won't go too deeply into that, because that could get us on a whole new conversation. And this is just the Lemon Project team, and that's the end. Thank you for listening.
Our next panelist, Sara Bon-Harper. She's Executive Director of James Monroe's Highland in Charlottesville. And if you have not been to Highland, you are missing out. It is first of all, it's an incredibly beautiful place. There is a story that is being told and supported in terms of the different interpretation modalities, and committed to excellence. So I have the good fortune of working with Sara under the umbrella of strategic cultural partnerships, and just have incredible respect, not simply for the hard work of correcting a historical narrative, but also taking on what to me is an incredible challenge, and she does it so elegantly, of managing what is a very large tract of land. So it's not just talking about slavery, but it's also very much about conservation and preservation and natural resources and stewardship, and things that I would be afraid, and I grew up on a farm, I would be afraid to take this on. So Sara has my ultimate respect as a leader and, of course, as a scholar. So let me welcome Executive Director Sara Bon-Harper for our next session.
What an extremely kind introduction. Thank you, Maureen. All right, thank you. And thank you again, Maureen. That's very kind. It is really wonderful to be in this collegial group and to see our overlaps and our differing perspectives. And I forgot to set my timer, so bear with me. All right, now I won't talk forever. And to really think about the different ways we approach truthful history. And from my angle today, I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the big directional arrows, if you will, where we're headed, what we're thinking about, and really the why question of what we're doing. And I've given it all away in my cover slide because it really is about the future, and we'll come back to that at the end. As you've heard, we are located in Charlottesville, Virginia, technically just outside of Charlottesville in Albemarle County, just east of the Blue Ridge in rolling Piedmont, Virginia. It's 2 hours straight up I-64, and we welcome you 7 days a week, and we hope you'll come see us. And I'm going to focus really on the public-facing and the big picture messages. And so to do that, I do need to back up a little and repeat some history, which you may already know, which is that Highland is a complicated historic site where the big yellow house has dominated the landscape since it was built in the 1870s. Of course, that makes it after James Monroe, the most famous occupant of this site. And the little Monroe component is the white piece tucked away in the back you see on the top right there. And the historic image of it, sometime 1930 or just earlier, shows that it's a really typical country property. It does not look exceptional in this view. It really is an evolved structure with lots of different periods and things tacked on and removed and so forth. And that all figured into the complex history that we are unwrapping now. And the complex history, having been changed, is what leads us to our really exciting moment now to change from stem to stern what our historic site is doing. And that's why it's important that I back up a little and talk about this. It's that little white component you see on the left that for a long time was said to be a remnant wing of James Monroe's main house, the house that he and his family and an enslaved cook named Hannah and her 3 youngest children, all boys, ages 1 through 7, moved into in November of 1799. It was said that that little piece, that white piece, was a remnant wing where the larger component had been destroyed by fire. That story existed as early as 1885 and stood until 2016 when we made a big announcement. And how that came to be, as you can see, this series of Virginia Mutual Assurance plats talk about a 2-wing house, these 2 rectangles, if you want to consider each of them a wing, and that clearly what they had in present day is one of those, or is one, and they said it was one of those, all right? That's a key distinction, but it's only one. So they knew they didn't have the whole thing. When William and Mary inherited the property in December of 1974, upon the death of the last private owner, immediately the word started bubbling around that this wasn't James Monroe's house. It wasn't even James Monroe's property. It had nothing to do with James Monroe. And how could this sophisticated, worldly statesman have occupied that little garage apartment kind of wing, and that just didn't work, right? And so William and Mary took on 3 research initiatives. I'm showing you the cover of the archaeological report from January of 1976, and this was one of the 3 strands of research. One was historic. The reigning Monroe biographer, Harry Ammon, who remained prominent until his death within the last 10 years or so, looked at all the documents and said, yes, Monroe lived there. Yes, he wrote letters from there. Yes, the documents say he owned that property, so it all checks out. I concur. The great and renowned Virginia architectural historian Milton Grigg came and apparently crawled all up in the rafters and looked at everything and said, yep, it all matches what we saw in those insurance plats, and there's no material discrepancies. This is the story, and this is a remnant wing of Monroe's main house. I don't know how he came to that conclusion, but I do not support that, and our research does not. Archaeology dug, as you can see, under that big yellow house, around inside the foundations of the basement of that little white house, and in the outside areas. They couldn't really find that missing wing, right? If that was one wing, there should have been signs of the other wing. That's like an archaeological, like, you got that. They didn't find it. It was so inconclusive, oddly. But like every other archaeological report before or since, it said you should dig more. And after that, the word was out that the Monroe house was authenticated. All right. So you had one yes. You had 2 yeses and a maybe. And that came to yes. It was authenticated as Monroe's home. And that is how it was interpreted for a long time, until I showed up. Having an archaeologist as an executive director, many problems can be solved with a shovel. Not all, but many. And so really the question was, if they didn't find that other wing, why not? And there are plenty of other clues that this isn't really time to go into, but there were plenty of clues that there was something really missing from the landscape that we didn't understand. And we found what was missing. And ultimately, we were able to say that the little white house was the guest house that Monroe had built by enslaved carpenters George Williams and Peter Mallory in 1818. And the archaeological remains of the 1799 house are still there, and it is a completely separate building. Okay, so that's our starting point for what we really wanted to talk about today, which is the concept of sharing authority. And this is the title of a Mellon grant received by William and Mary in 2019, in July of 2019. And the concept is that at historic places or historic museums, the responsibility and input in exploring and teaching and interpreting history shouldn't all be done by museum professionals whose own histories aren't related to that place or that time. Okay? So the concept of shared authority means that for research, interpretation, and really the relationships in the world, the community and the museum, should be shared, right, with museum staff and community members whose own histories are tied to that place or the topic that we're talking about. And the image here is from one of our early research meetings in 2018 or 19. The first big project that we created was the reinterpretation of that little guest house, that 1818 guest house, the house that Peter and George built. And we have reinterpreted the interior of that. In the main goals that I want to be sure that I share are that the stories of the people and events of Highland are intertwined. Okay, there's not presidential history here, everybody else's story here. Rather, we're telling an interwoven set of stories that are the stories of the young United States. So the people and events of Highland together. And the second big soapbox that I'll jump on every chance I get is that these individual stories and these individual events are all connected to the larger threads of U.S. history. All right, they're not isolated, they're not solely individual, they may be individual stories, but they're related to a historical context. We are all shaped by the historic time we live in, and in turn we all shape the historic moment that we have. All right, and that's really the essence of what I'm showing you here. So that was the interior of the house. We opened that in the fall of 21. So you may have seen this. And in the past year, we've been working on interpreting some of the other spaces. Through some of that Mellon Sharing Authority grant, descendant council members have been helping us with the content, theme, and tone of our research and of our interpretation. And so that we are putting new stories in all the other spaces of the site, including this reconstructed quarters outbuilding that you see in the center here. And I show you some of the bottom right is a before picture, and the top is some of the themes that we're showing. This is what it looked like this week after reinterpretation and new exhibition components in. We're not quite done in these couple of rooms, but we will be soon. And this room in particular talks about another mantra of mine, educate and inspire. Right, where we want to give people the tools to explore history and inspire them to do so. Right? I think that if you go to an art museum, you should come away wanting to paint or draw or sculpt, right? What should you do when you go to a history museum? How should that inspire you, right? This room, we hope, when you come and visit, will say, yes, history is at our fingertips. In fact, it does say that, so it does. But we hope that you will come away then saying, yes, and now I have the tools to explore. We show you how letters, how oral history and autobiography, interesting that we've combined those, right? The self-telling stories. We are talking about Monroe's autobiography and some Zora Neale Hurston oral history in the same area. Those are self-told stories, right? Are they interwoven pieces of American history? Yes, they are. All right, so that's what this room is about. The middle room, which I don't have a photo of, just for brevity, is about how some of the people connected to Highland historically, how their stories connect to these larger threads of US history, so not individual stories. And then the final room that is newly interpreted is about the ideals and the ideas of the American Revolution, those revolutionary concepts and how they are applied through time. So we talk about how they're applied to women, how in Gabriel's rebellion, Gabriel and his collaborators employed them. We talk about how they were used and misused in secession during the Civil War. And then again, the idea should be to think about how are we now going to employ those ideals, right? That's really where we want to go with that. And of course, there's our wonderful postdoc, Dr. Maria Di Benigno, curated a set of picture books for each of these rooms. And we see intergenerational collaboration and interest around those. You often see a grandparent and a grandchild, or even just a kid sitting there drawing. One of those books is about drawing. And so they're for each room. All right, and so to go back to the Highland Council of Descendant Advisors. So the news of the research discoveries in 2016 then brought community interest in Highland, and we started developing relationships that we had not had previously. And we started meeting. Some of us attended the summit on teaching about slavery at Montpelier with the National Trust early in 2018. And we rolled that right into a series of conversations. And by 2019, we were talking about what did we want to do together, right? The growing descendant community, individuals who traced their African-American ancestors to Highland, either in slavery before the Civil War or after the Civil War. What did they want Highland to do, and what did we want to do together? So site interpretation was one, right? That was mine. This was the core of that component of the Mellon grant, right? I wanted our museum staff not to do that without input. And so we asked for it and gratefully received input there. So in that vein, the Descendants Council, now about 10 people, ages between, say, 25 and 83 or 84, advise and direct Highlands initiatives. You see one of our Descendant Council members teaching Charlottesville City School teachers and staff about teaching hard histories. That was like moments before the pandemic in early March 2020. And then participated in interpreting Highland. And I remind myself about that with just this image. I know you probably can't read it there, but one of the council members said, we'd like you to do more and do it a little bit harder about colonization in Liberia. So that's what that is. You might see on this sign too that our signs are bilingual, English and Spanish. Sure, there's accessibility, and we hear people saying, thank you for that. And I'm gonna bring my father, and that kind of thing. Also, what does it tell us? It tells us, who is this history for? It's not just for people who have roots here, or whose ancestors were here, or who've been here for generations. It's for anyone who wants to come and consider the concepts. And I do believe that is true of US history. So all of this work has been done with the help of descendants. And right now, what we're really looking at, we're getting towards the end of the Mellon Grant, which isn't really the break point, but is one of the things that we're taking stock and thinking and talking more about, is that we as Highland, as the museum, are also participating in the descendants initiatives, right? So they helped us with our homework, right? new exhibits, new programs. And we're helping them with their vision. So I think I probably mentioned this a year ago. We went, a group of us, to Florida and met with the descendants of enslaved people who were sold there from Highland in 1828. And in 2022, we spent a couple days in fellowship with their descendants at the church that they founded after the Civil War, right? That was a wish of descendant counselors. The Descendant Council came up with an idea for a group of students that we were leading. The group of students studied their food ways. I have to say that carefully because people think I'm saying food waste, which is another thing, but food practices, food habits, food traditions. So that involves accessibility. It includes knowledge. It includes cultural practice. It includes the role of family. It includes food sovereignty. So our group of students finishing this time last year, studied, and then one of these students came back this year to study how we might then take those ideas and put them out in the community. What programming can we do? How can we bring people into the conversation? How can we give back to the community in this area? So I got a little bit ahead of myself. The Food Ways Project, and I'll give it a minute. I don't know if your phones will pick that up from here, but I'll talk for a second while you do. And so our 3 William and Mary students with Mrs. Eubanks here, after a really, really fun interview talking about her food traditions in her family. And so the students created what we call a community archive. All right, and so that is a repository of video recorded stories accessible only by the participants. Is it coming up okay? Is it working? Okay, thank you. And so the participants themselves can download and watch and share those videos. No one else can. I have it because it rests in my digital world, but they're not public at all. It's just for the family. And then there's a public component that you're seeing now that the participants said, yes, why don't you edit that into a nice story and let's agree on what the story is and so forth. And so that's the public component that the students put together. And then I have new from last year, this short trailer for a video, and I'll give you a QR code for the whole thing next. But I do want to share this trailer that really, it just sort of teases up, as trailers do, the story of that trip to Florida and what that meant to unite the descendant communities of a community that was ruptured in 1828. And what that meant for so many of us who were a part of it. The full video is about 20 minutes, and you're welcome to, you can just email me if you'd like the link or grab it via this QR code. The trip to Florida was one of the elements that early on when we started meeting with community members that they said that they were interested in doing. And I thought, I have no idea how to do that. And the other thing that they said that they wanted to do was to have a day at Highland for descendants and for descendants of other communities in our area to share and to show people the work being done at Highland, to bring people together, to let people know that no one is walking this path alone. And I thought, again, to myself, I have no idea how to do that. But that was a long time ago. And this year, we had the second annual Descendants Day at Highland. The first one was in 2022. And we brought together this year about 250 people. We brought people from the Florida congregation that we had visited. We brought people from throughout Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic. We brought descendants from Nevada and from St. Louis, and the prior year someone from Chicago. Connections were made of people who had never known family, but through the genealogy came to connect and found family, essentially. And it was, it is an amazing and powerful day. If it keeps growing, I'm not sure how we're going to scale it, but it is a real, it is a real place to make connections. And the idea is that it's not just for Highland descendants, it's for anyone interested in or participating in community-engaged learning, research, interpretation, and working towards repair and healing. And so that's really what we're working on there. And so I hope in these examples I'm showing what I'm really exploring in my own thinking, this idea of museum work led by museum, that's right, exhibit panels and programs, and museum work facing the community and led by the community. And this is a real shift, I think, in my thinking. I think we were doing this work before it came to me realizing what exactly we were doing and being led in this work by our descendant council. And so in coming to that realization kind of late, even though we'd been doing it for a year or two, I went back, and these flip charts from our early meetings still hang in my office. And I went back and read them again and photographed them to archive them, and remembering that they said early on, writing down what council members are saying, it's not just about history, it's about the future, and it's about healing. All right, and this isn't an easily done or a quickly done phenomenon, but this is what we're working on, and it's not about the past. All right. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for sharing that trailer. That was very moving, so I look forward to seeing the video in its entirety. Let me just queue up my slides. All right. It's going to be hard to follow Jody and Sarah, but I will give it my best shot. So again, my name is Maureen Elgersman-Lee. I am the director of the W&M Bray School Lab. The Bray School Lab was officially launched 2021, in the fall of 2021. We're all still under a pandemic, so we were still largely remote at that time, moving into more of a hybrid environment by the beginning of 2022, when we can say that we really functionally launched the lab at that point. We had student thought partners. Students were able to be on campus and come into the lab and have our team, and we've, of course, grown our team since the last Slate Seminar. So I'm going to introduce to some, as I say, present to some and introduce to others, of our staff, because we started with a small staff. We work under the leadership of Anne Marie Stock, who is the presidential liaison for Strategic Cultural Partnerships. She used to be the associate vice provost at W&M. When she transitioned from that role to this newly created role as presidential liaison, she took some people with her. I was fortunate enough to be one of those people that came with her, which was great because I had just started at W&M. I'd only been there a few months, and had come to work with Anne Marie quite closely. And just having that comfort, knowing that I'm going with her to the next, I guess, iteration of her leadership was a great comfort. So let me just briefly introduce. Because what I'm talking about, the hard history, while these are my slides, this represents what the lab has been doing since the last Slate Seminar in October of last year. So this is the collective work, snapshots of the collective work that we've done. So I want to make no statements in any way that this is suggesting that I'm carrying any of this by myself. So I'll do it in the same way we did it in our session this morning. So Nicole Brown, if you just want to wave your hand, or Nicole Brown is our lab assistant. She was part of the lab when we started, and incredible scholar, PhD student here at William & Mary American Studies. Shortly after our 2022 Slate Seminar, we filled our full-time position for an oral historian. So we have the great pleasure of having brought Tanya Meredith on board. She is our full-time oral historian. And not just fleshing out the team, right? It's not just about hiring people and putting people in offices and so on and giving you an ID card and some business cards. So really meeting our mission, our responsibilities around the work that we need to do at the Bray School Lab. This year, we continue to grow our team with the addition of our full-time genealogist, Elizabeth Drembus. So she's joined us in March of this year. So I'm really pleased to look at where we were literally a year ago and where we are now. We have really come a long way, and let me also add Grace Helmick, who is the educational media technician for Strategic Cultural Partnerships, having gone into a full-time role, and incredible support for us. The Voices Project, capturing so many of the different things that we are doing for the sake of sharing it, for the sake of having a record and documenting it, and just a great all-around person to work with. So we really are extremely fortunate within the Bray School Lab to really have a fantastic team. We have other team members in Strategic Cultural Partnerships and that are leading the other divisions as well. So it's an incredible opportunity and privilege and a real responsibility as well. So again, we are the William & Mary Bray School Lab. So when I was thinking about these slides, it was not, whether we're doing hard history. So absolutely. So if we think about hard history, in general, it's about telling the truth about history and undoing the past of either mistelling or not telling at all the story of slavery. So that's the hard history part, but there's also the part that this is just hard work. Like, this is not stuff that gets done overnight. It is digging in deep on research and asking questions, and in different cases reconciling what has been done in the past with what needs to be done in the present and the future. And if we look at the research and we look at the student names and so on, this is a long game, right? We're playing a long game here, which also makes it hard. Not that hard is not rewarding, not that hard is not good, but it's hard stuff. It keeps you awake at night. It makes you feel some kind of way at different times. It gives you chills. It brings you to tears and everything between. So we are doing the hard history, and I think rather than talking about a single hard history, it's almost like, well, which hard history would you like to talk about now? Because there are multiple hard histories that we're doing at the same time, trying to give focus to and trying to move each of them along so that we are producing more knowledge, that we are drilling down deep into the information that we have access to, even while we look for more information. So one aspect of the hard history, or which hard history, is school versus symbol. I'm going to set these up as kind of opposing ideas, even though in many cases they are not just school versus symbol, but school and symbol, right? We can create this kind of binary, or we can also see them as part of a continuum. So school versus symbol, or you can put the ampersand in, because we're very fond of the ampersand, school and symbol. So this iconic image of Diggs House, Bray Diggs House it's called, the building that housed the Bray School, the Williamsburg Bray School, for its first 5 years, from 1760 to late 1765, when, in fact, the documents, as we now understand what they were telling us, more recently understand that not that the building was falling down, but the building was too small for the operations of the school. We see on one student list 34 students at school at present, at the time that the teacher Ann Wager produced that list for the trustees to share with the Bray Associates in London, who were funding the majority of the expenses of the school. And we have to remember that Ann Wager lived in the same building. So, but this iconic image is the building, right? The image of the building and I think the oldest known image of the building to date. But we know because the school operated out of this building for only 5 of its 14 years, so opening in 1760, closing in 1774, 5 of those years the operations of the school took place within this building. The other 9 years, it was another building that no longer stands. So then this becomes greater than, bigger than the 5 years that it was the Bray School. It stands as symbol for the entirety of the operation of the school and in many ways, we invoke this in many different ways. It stands for the search for the lived experiences of Ann Wager, of the children, understanding what happened in this building. How can we know this? How can we understand this? And understanding it from the inside, but also understanding what was going on outside, the yard, the physical space, both in front and behind the building, which was also part of the school, right? It's part of the property, it's part of the footprint of the students and the teacher, and it's also an incredible, as local archaeologists who've been studying the site are telling us, it's also an incredible repository for literally hundreds of thousands. I still can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, it's in 250,000 artifacts.
How do you pack that many artifacts in that space? Like, I still can't. Yeah. I'm like, I say thousands. Yeah, I can see that. Hundreds of thousands. It's really, really hard for me to wrap my head around. And it's a symbol, it stands as a symbol in that way. We call this the Slate Seminar because we are recognizing the fact that the largest concentration, this is what archaeologists are telling us, the largest concentration of slate pencil fragments ever found in Williamsburg were found at the site of the original Bray School. Were they used by Bray School students? There's still some debate about. There's the evidence, there's kind of this common sense reasoning that, I know Janice is shaking her head, common sense is not common. So how do you reconcile? That's part of the hard work. How do you reconcile the surviving archaeological objects, the artifacts, sorry, the artifacts versus features? I learned that terminology this past year. So how do we deal with this? How do we reconcile this? So this is why we call it the Slate Seminar. It speaks to what's been found and still the need to find more and understand more. This building is also the model, the visual model when we think about of our expectations of what we expect to see by this time next year. So when we meet again for Slate Seminar 2024, the Bray School building will have been restored by the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation and will be open to the public by that time. So we'll have this object, this image, we'll be able to have this, and then we'll have the actual building that's been restored to its 18th century configuration, and look at those and kind of, past, present, it's about the future, all those ideas. And I think this it's going to have different meaning. It's going to have more meaning. We're going to look at, well, this is different. It will not be an exact replica because this is a 20th century image, and there are already 20th century or certainly post-Bray modifications to the building. So even in that, there'll be some differences. But we'll be looking for this, right? We're looking for something we can recognize as this, in a matter of less than a year. So another aspect of this hard history is how do we listen to the building? How do we understand the building? How do we glean information from this building to understand the lived experiences of the children, known as scholars? They're referred to as scholars in the documents, and also understand this also as we could think about this as a co-working living space, right? The school's operating downstairs, Ann Wager is living upstairs. So even before we started talking about mixed-use communities and so on, we certainly could look at it from that perspective. This is the inside of the building before it was moved, and if you have been past the building at any time in the last couple of weeks or so. Again, the building stands on the corner of Nassau and Francis Street in the Colonial Williamsburg historic area. You'll see it has no roof. It has not had a roof for a little while. And there is a lot of modifications being done to get it back to its colonial composition, as I'll call that. So the other hard history, central to the work, another hard history you want to talk about is the finding the students. So this is a snapshot of one of the 3 known surviving what we call student lists. They are enclosures. They were, we can think about them as attachments to trustee reports that were sent from Williamsburg to London, giving a report on the status and condition of the school and its operations. And there were some of the letters that had this enclosure, which is the list of students presently at school. It is very much a snapshot of students at a given time in the school. We have only 3 lists, or 3 years worth of lists, for 14 years of operation. So how do we, as Elizabeth said this morning, how do we squeeze as much as we can out of this information? This is a really nice excerpt because we have different populations represented and different enslavers represented. So John and Mary Ashby, free, right? So recognizing that there were free children, that while they were the vast minority of the students for whom we have names at present, they were free and they are named. And that puts us on a trail of genealogical research connecting to the present. We have Sally. We have, I'm going to skip down to the college. Of course, that is William and Mary. And Adam and Fanny were owned by William and Mary. That allows us to think about institutions' roles in slavery. Of course, because we're talking about the Bray Associates, we are inherently talking about the Church of England, but we are also talking about William and Mary, as well as others. And then we have, of course, private individuals of significant stature, power, and influence as well. Adam and Fanny have their own kind of extended history, again, not just about the past. I love that. It's not just about the past, it's the future. Because we're able to take what we know and have learned about Adam and Fanny as children who were owned by Will and Mary, who were sent to the Bray School, and we get to infuse this with historical imagining, enable it with contemporary technology, and we get Adam and Fanny's World, which is a digital map that lives on our website and was produced and very much led by one of our kind of inaugural student thought partners, and again, very much with significant guidance from Nicole as well. So we're able to take this line from the 18th century and create something that is truly 21st century. But this also speaks to the fact that we only have 3 years, and we are constantly asking and trying to answer the question, are there more? Are there more? Some scholars who have been studying the Bray schools are very adamant that there are no more to discover, and this is all we will have. So how do we mine this as much as possible while, I think, I like to tread on the side of optimism, and think that we will find more, that we will find more in some way. It may not look like this, but it may be in a private collection, and as we've found, or as Nicole found, they can be in places they're just simply not supposed to be, right? There are places that it's like, you are not supposed to be here. Thankfully you are, because you've been found, but how many other cases of those documents and other information are awaiting us? So we have to be diligent both on this side of the Atlantic and eventually on the other side of the Atlantic as well. Working with these limited documents, and some of my colleagues recognize that from before. Again, this is our collective work here. So this represents a transcription of one of the student lists, the 1765 list, that has 34, you can see a total of 34 students. who were at that school at that time. The numbers that you see in the column represent the number of children from that household that were sent, and then we get to a total of 34, in all 34. Also borrowing from earlier presentation, just to show how incredibly detailed and very time-consuming this work is. We get one, for a number of children, we get one line. So-and-so's Molly, right? The colleges, Adam and Finn. We get one line, and from that line, we hope to, and we strive to create a more fleshed out biography and hopefully ultimately be able to connect someone from the past to the present, to connect that person through their family line to the present. That's hard history. I don't know of things that are much harder than that, and yet we collectively take on that task and try to reconstruct family trees. How we make oral history speak to documents, and the work of oral history, again, hard history in the sense that there are clear best practices of descendant engagement, of oral history standards, but it's time consuming. It takes time to do the necessary work if you're going to do it right, to make contacts, to build trust, to be transparent. And then you actually do the interviews, and then you edit, and then you send back, and this is what we have. And ask for feedback and do editing, and then send things for uploading, and then that goes in a queue. We wait for someone to, who in this queue uploads it. So that's hard work as well. But we're doing it and we're committed to it. And I think it is, again, that incredible responsibility, but what a privilege. Who in their lifetime gets to be a part of something so incredible as this? So counting the children, very quickly, counting the children continues to be a topic of discussion and debate among scholars, and we are pulled into that and part of that. How many children attended the Bray School, and why is that important? Why is that important? Some argue more conservative numbers, some argue more liberal numbers, or this is a really bad picture of that historic marker, but it says, as many as 400 children may have attended the school. How do we get there? Right, when we only have so many years of kind of concrete data around student lists, how do we get to that? We will have to generalize somewhat, allow for redundancy, and see kind of where we land, and then continue to mine for more information. We at the Bray School Lab are currently landing at some 300 children. We don't believe that it's fully over 400, because we are seeing some evidence of repetition or redundancy across the lists. So we're kind of allowing for a certain percentage when it comes to that. So we're talking about 300 discrete, unique students attending the school. And why does it matter? Why is it important to us that it's 200 or 300 or 400? Right? We can unpack that in our Q&A very soon. Again, agency versus instruction. The agency that the children and self-knowledge that the children brought to the school versus the instruction that they were given, which is in many ways to tear down whatever sense of self and autonomy that they may have had in service of the institution of slavery, in service of growing the Church of England, and in service of the capital investment that their owners had in them as chattel. We have to look at multiple modalities of research and have a fully interdisciplinary approach. We're mining available information, looking for more, and producing more knowledge. We have to be, as a lab, knowledge producers. We can't be stagnant. We have to produce new knowledge. And some of that is presenting information in new ways, because when you present information in new ways, you do create new understanding. And then lastly, just as always, our message is please connect with us. We have a new location. We are in Barrett House. Some of you know that we were in Travis House up until, as a full complement, we are now in Barrett House in one building. It's just behind. It's a few steps away from Travis House. We still essentially stand on the corner of Francis and Henry Streets in just off of Merchant Square. And I'm going to leave it with that, and I would love to move into our Q&A. So what questions do you have for us? Yes, Ms. Lassiter.
Well, you're right. Last year was our highest in person and our highest in person and our highest virtually. I think part of what happened last year is we had more than ever presenters from the community. That's been from the, even the first few years when we were in the Bruton Heights School, a lot of our panelists were community members. But last year, we had a lot of people who submitted proposals, and then I think they brought their relatives and friends, and so we had more. Also, we've been doing it for 13 years, so I think the word has maybe gotten out a little bit better in some ways. But we just try really hard. We spend a lot of time in the community. And we try to encourage people and make them feel welcome when they come. So hopefully that's some of the things that are working for us. But I think one of the biggest things is that there were more people from the community who wanted to actually develop panels and talk about their history, their families, their churches, and people came with that. Well, part of that, of course, is, we will continue to do everything we can through our social media and our listserv, but also word of mouth, so we count on y'all to tell everybody, right? And so that's a big, because we can put it out there, but you all can say, yeah, it was a good thing. I enjoyed it. It was worth spending my Friday and Saturday, on campus. So I think all of those things together, once again, last year we had the largest number of submitted proposals, and this year it's even larger. And so at least on that level, we're already, continuing to increase. So hopefully that will show up again in attendance also. Also, I will say, the positives of COVID, right? We were able, because that one year the entire symposium was virtual. And not only did we get more people internationally and from around the country, we got more people locally too. So I think some of the people who started with us on COVID, during COVID, are actually came in person last year. So.
One other question.
Okay. Well, we are the model for a lot of schools. Brown was the first institution to fund a project like this. W&M Mary was the second. Now, the difference between us and Brown is that Brown actually, as a university, did not enslave people, but the Brown family made their wealth from the slave trade, lumber, shipbuilding, and all of that. So that's how they were connected. So the connections are different, but that's how we differ from Brown, and some of our work is different as a result. What we're trying to do, but we're a model for, like I said, because one of the things as I was suggesting, people come to us or we go to them to talk about how we're doing what we're doing, and then we get ideas from them too, that we can bring back. And so it's very much, I think, an exchange, because as I was saying earlier, it's not as new as it was, but it's still a very new thing that colleges and universities, and there's at least one high school involved in universities studying slavery because of the property they're on in Connecticut. But it's there's a lot to learn from each other. But again, I will always give Ruth Simmons and Brown, as I say, I refer to them as the mothership, right? Because people started talking about this. If you thought about it, a school that's over 300 years old was founded in the colonial period. Of course, I shouldn't say of course. I'm a historian, we always have to be doubtful, but there's probably a good chance that there were enslaved people here laboring, but people just didn't seem to think about it. Everybody was surprised. I think so many people have the idea of that Gone with the Wind slavery, right? That it all was plantations and picking cotton or tobacco and everybody was happy. There's a very different, the reality is very different. And so we are, just setting that record straight. And now people understand that not only did, colleges and universities enslave people, churches enslave people, businesses enslave people. There wasn't really an entity that wasn't somehow involved in slavery. Yeah, it is. And it should. That's one of the things that I've always believed, right? That you should not live in a college town and not be able to take advantage of what the college has to offer. And for too many years, I think that was the reality here for William and Mary. We need to be a part of this community, and the community needs to be a part of us.
Thank you. I actually have a question for you, Sarah. Branding. So I see, and I think I've seen it maybe in the last week for the first time. So William and Mary's Highland, is that a change from James Monroe's Highland? Is there something, or can you just explain that?
For our public, we have been open, the site has been open to the public since, I don't know, the 1930s. It was called Ash Lawn, it was called Ash Lawn Highland, and now it's called Highland, which is James Monroe's name for the property. And to the public, we will be Highland. And to people locally, we'll still be Ash Lawn. But here on campus, we are, working really closely with a lot of different departments on campus. And we like to underscore that we are part of William and Mary. We are missioned by William and Mary to do this work out in the community. To it's part of upholding democracy. It's part of civic strengthening. It's part of a lot of ways that the university does good in the world. So when we're here on campus in particular, we try to underscore that and to point out that we're not an outside entity coming in. We are part of William and Mary. So it's not an official name, but we've been using it for a few years, especially when we started teaching more consistently.
Great.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And that's a question that we get a lot. And I don't have one single answer. You'd think that I would have practiced that, but I don't have a single answer, right? So it's easy to talk about how our council got formed, right? When our news went far and wide, a local person came up and said, we have a connection. And we started talking. But we started talking a little bit. Like for a while, we would talk about a topic, and then for a longer while, we would not talk about any topics. And how do you get started on that? And eventually, a mutual friend introduced me to Mrs. Saylor, who was instrumental because she, on her friend's good word, trusted me and provided introductions for me to other members of the community. Some were family members, some were community members, and that's kind of how word got out. And I need to say that back in previous times, there had been a connection with a descendant of a later period from Highland, from the later 19th century. And she had collaborated with people who worked there at the time, but there had not been any continuity in those roles among the staff, and I was picking up things from complete scratch, and there was no record of that. And so we met anew and regenerated that connection. And then how do I recommend? I think the one thing that I do say regularly that is like straight up advice that I'll stand behind in any circumstance, others are much more circumstantially dependent, but in any circumstance, I would start with that. What do you want? What is your goal? What is my goal? Let's be upfront. Like, here's what I want to see. Like when I stood there and said, I want to see new exhibits that talk about diversity of perspective. Here's a bunch of non-museum people looking at me like, yeah, okay, we can help you with that. And then there's the group saying, we want a big picnic. And me going, I don't know how to do picnics, or we want to meet the people in Florida, right? And that's that Genesis moment of what do you want, and put it all on a big piece of paper together and look at it and say, how can I support your goals? How can you support my goals, right? And that is, there's lots of other nuance that would be situationally dependent, but those are some of the key parts that I would always hang my hat on. And I'd be really glad to keep talking, okay?
Let me take this moment to highlight this conversation. I'll make a bridge from this conversation to one of the sessions tomorrow that I'm very much looking forward to, and that is the Prioritizing Descendant Voices panel that we have tomorrow on our schedule for the Slate Seminar. So that will be the 11 o'clock session. And also I think part of that will probably boil over, if I can use that, to the afternoon session, which is focusing on 2024 year of the Bray School. I think those in many ways are connected. So we've intentionally built in space to have some very frank conversations and to come away with some real sense of next steps and so on. So just to just kind of get people looking forward to tomorrow, even while we're still having our conversation today. Nicole, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, and I don't.
Okay. Oh.
Want me to go first?
You need to have a thick skin. And you have to check your ego. I would say that. There's all kinds of, not anything about Williamsburg, past experience. There's a whole other bunch of things I could say, but I would say you're going to have a thick skin. There's going to be some real tough days. There's going to be some just euphoria days, and there's going to be probably a lot in between. But I think key also is keeping in perspective, and in many ways, while you are part of the community, understand that this is not about you in many different situations, and being willing to accept that. That's what I would say, just off the cuff. I might change my answer in a minute.
I have a one-word advice. Listen.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Well, I've gotten this question. I've gotten this question because exactly what we're doing and what the Lemon Project, we are charged with doing the research and making it public. Two things that a lot of people don't want us to do. And so in some ways, I'm aware that, because as you say, we are funded by the state, but so far, I just do what I do. We do what we do. I teach African American history. No one has come into my classroom yet, but I am aware. I am aware that there are things in the country that challenge exactly what it is we're doing. The biggest thing I say is we just keep doing what we're doing till we can't, if that comes. And, it's, and possibly, community support will matter, right? If people say, if that happens and people say, then we may need the community to speak up and say, no, this, we need to keep doing this the way it's been done. Because, the truth is we've tried not teaching the history. And it doesn't go away. It just bubbles back up periodically, right? And so why not try going on and telling the truth, getting it out there, and then dealing with it, right? Because it's clear we're going to have to deal with it. And so it's why not just, do it and bite the bullet? I get a lot of questions, often, well, why are you still talking about slavery? you know, and I'm like, well, let me tell you what happened in 1865 and what didn't happen, right? And so, and the intensity of maintaining a black labor source in the South in particular, and why you have the book Slavery by Another Name, you know, you have all of these instances of where and how things, you know, laws were put in place and to establish and maintain control, and, you know, and so all those, that hasn't worked, right? If it had worked, everybody would be happy. Right, and so it's not working, and it hasn't worked, and so again, let's try something different. And again, I can't explain what's happening in Florida. I don't even know, you know, that could be, you know, that's a years-long conversation. But
So today, that really has an impact.
no, no. Sure.
And I want to just add to that in not speaking as someone from within the university, but as someone from a museum. I think museums will become ever more important, right? And as partners to teachers, as places where students and teachers can go and really explore truthful history, I think museums have a really big role, and will continue to do so.
Because you made me think, for a long time, public history has been seen almost like the stepchild of history, right? You know, if you're not scholarly and if you're not using words that people need dictionaries to, you know, decipher, then you're not really a historian, you know. And so, but the reality is, as Sarah's suggesting, most people get their history from public sources, and we need to start making sure that our public sources are as strong as they can be and as accurate as they can be. So if they're not coming into our classrooms, or if we're somehow not allowed, you know, to teach this stuff, then there are museums and there are documentaries and other types of opportunities, but they have to be strong sources. You don't want to continue to miseducate through that. But public history, and more people want it, right? Students want to major in it. They want certificates. People want their doctorates in it. You know, it's no longer a stepchild, right? It's I think, this is just me, one of the most important way of teaching and getting history across, and it has to be good and strong and accurate. And so, and then it doesn't matter, well, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but it may matter less what's happening in these more academic spaces.
You want to?
Yeah, well, one example, two summers ago now, we did something called, we have Lemons Learners, and we work with the idea is that this will become an annual summer program. We work with middle school students, and it was called Black History Matters, and it was a mix of students, Black, Asian, Latinx, and white students. And we did it actually at Blair Middle School because it was still during COVID and we weren't outsiders weren't allowed to come on campus. And we did that. They learned genealogy. They special collections from William & Mary came to Blair with examples of historic pieces, and they learned about their local history, the triangle. One of the coolest things that happened is that there was a picture that the principal at the school recognized the woman in this picture from the triangle, right? She called her, and she talked, and then they put it on speaker, and you should have seen these students' faces as they listened to this lady who had grown up in the Triangle community talk about what it was like. And so then they did their presentations on the last day, and their families were invited, and they talked about, they had done their own genealogy for the most part. There was one student who, for whatever reason, didn't want to do his family, so we gave him another family. Of course, his mother wanted to know why he hadn't done his family, but anyway, that's another. But just they were so excited, and we got at their age, and something that I get in the classroom too. Why didn't I know this? Is a constant refrain. We got it from those middle school kids, and I get it all the time in the college classes, because they want to know why didn't anybody tell me this? And so hiding this from them really makes no sense, right? But that's what people think they have to do.
And I would just say at the Bray School Lab, we are pleased and encouraged and excited that we are getting more requests from teachers to bring the students to us. So we want to come and tour the lab. We've seen your website. We want to talk with you. We want to, sometimes it's relatively loose. Sometimes it's a little more structured. We're doing this. We really want to know how you can kind of help us think about this, and so on and so forth, in ways that are kind of traditional history or maybe social studies, but also even more recently, students who are in performing arts and are interested in creating a performance in honor of the Bray School and the Bray School students. So we are really pleased to have people coming to us increasingly, certainly at the high school, middle school level, also at the university level, and oftentimes, we're putting together, it may be led by the Lemon Project, but we are maybe creating a little bit of value added and adding to the robustness of that visit. So we are just really pleased that we can do that. But I have to say, we've seen an uptick this semester, and we're not even done the semester, but just a real uptick in the number of teachers who are just right here in Williamsburg, but also outside of Williamsburg. So they're committing to time out of their schedule, buses, all that of field trips to come and talk with us and see what we're doing and stand in front of the Bray School building, because nobody can go in yet, and they're really excited about it. So we're pleased to be able to connect with them in that way as well.